The change selections command, which we talked about in the previous video, allows you to interact with anything in a graph which says what's on the graph and change what you get. So you can go on a legend and change what's going to appear in the legend. And we also said that you can look at where it says a single element in the minor title. Here it says DSL access. The idea is you can right click that, do a change selections and get a different element. However, that for obvious reasons is using the full selection interface as you do when you draw the graph, because you might want to go from one element to multiple elements in general, whereas there are clearly going to be situations when it might be nice just be able to change it from one thing to another, but it wouldn't really be practical to be able to change from this service to one other element, because there could be hundreds of elements in your model. So in general terms, it's not going to be very practical to just allow a easy thing to appear here to pick any one element. And so instead, you can pick a selection of elements or results or scenarios or whatever it is as a short list of things that will be available for the graph to then make it easy to change. So over here on the right, I have a graph that I drew earlier, which is several different services. It's one result and it's just one scenario, but I've predetermined that there are actually precisely 3 scenarios that I'd like to choose from here. And in a minute I'll show you how I've done it, but basically this control here allows me to slice between the different scenarios. So I can quickly go from dual base, let's say, to Ymax base, and then you'll see a few of the lines change position. Or if I go from Ymax base to DSL base, then the lines sort of stay the same, but actually you'll notice the scale changes, because if you know this model, you'll know that in the DSL case, there are some customers we can't actually reach at all. So what this is doing is it's basically saying I have predetermined that there are 3 scenarios of interest, and then because I've done that, I have also opted to only show one of them, which is called a slice, which I'll explain in a minute. And when I have that slice, I get a drop down currently in the top left hand corner of the graph. We may choose to actually put it where the minor title is. That makes it very easy. Well, first of all, makes it apparent that you have this functionality there, and makes it very easy to switch to one of the other cases. And that makes it nice and interactive and very easy to sort of see visually what changes between those different scenarios. So the way that I arrange for that to happen is, and let's just draw a new chart so you can see it. When I go draw new, so let's suppose I want to do the same thing, get different scenarios again. So when I go draw new, I'll pick some elements. Let's pick something different so we don't get confused with it. So let's pick internet access as a service. And then for results, let's just pick things to do with operating. So let's pick operating charge and operating costs and operating profit. And then when we get to the scenarios, I'm going to pick the same scenarios. But if I just did this, then I'd get all 3 and I would have no special control. And if I wanted to change it, I'd have to come back to this dialog. And as you would imagine, there could be loads of scenarios. And if it was elements, there could be loads of elements. What I'm going to do is I'm going to check this box here, which says slice. And that is the one which says I'm going to have this more narrow selection, and I'm going to pick the one that I want to appear on the chart by default. So let's say we want DSL base to be the one that we actually see. And then when I go OK, I get a graph like this, and I didn't really think about this very hard in advance, but it's got various results: operating charge, operating costs, which are both positive, and it's got operating profit, which is mostly negative. And it's currently showing me this for DSL base. And over here, I can pick the different scenarios very easily, and the whole chart just updates. And basically, that gives me a nice, easy way, not just to limit the choice to a small predefined selection, but to choose to have that control on the graph as if you like, a selector. Now, there is also the intention of so this is a thin slice where it's just one scenario. There is also the intention to allow you to pick more than one out of the shortlist, but I'm not sure whether that works. Let me quickly try it. So if I go draw new, and we'll do the same thing again because it's not currently, it is, I'm sorry, it is remembering already. It says got internet access, it's got those 3 results. I'll go to scenario. So this time, let's see what happens. The idea is that it should remember what I've selected. So if I said I wanted to have those 2 on the graph as it comes out, let's see what happens. I'll draw this, and no, I don't think it's attempting to do that. So the idea is, in the end, will be able to have more than one. And of course, if you have more than one, then this interface doesn't really work, because a drop down is a quick way to pick precisely one thing. So if for a thick slice, the interface would have to magically change to one where you'd click on where it says, where you'd click on the scenarios, and it would pop up a short list where you could make a multiple selection of the ones you want. We haven't done this yet, and we're not actually sure we're going to include it. But if I look at the PowerPoint just to try and explain it, then the idea would I thought I had it in this chart. Okay, I have it in the next chart. So basically, the simplest one is the slice. So basically, at the moment, the slice thing basically just says you get the control, and then you can pick precisely one of them. Let's actually stand back and think about what we're doing here, and then you'll understand the thick slice better. Sorry, my script wasn't very good here. So, in general, we are selecting data for elements and results and scenarios. Obviously, within elements, we have variance, and we have cost allocation, and scenarios are actually multidimensional too. So even though I'm presenting it as 3 dimensions, it's really more than 3 dimensions, but at the highest level, it's one set of elements, one set of results, and one set of scenarios. And when you make those selections, effectively you're implying a cube, which is the set of points, the set of data points which will appear on the chart. So you've got scenarios this way, you've got elements this way, you've got results this way. And if you pick 3 of each, then there will be potentially 27 data points. It's kind of hard to convey even 2 dimensions worth of data, let alone 3 on a graph. And so when we're doing the slicing, what we're doing is we're going to predetermine that we're going to have one particular scenario that's present on the graph, and so the graph will show me several elements and several results, but just this current scenario. And then when I use the drop down, it allows me to essentially move that slice up and down the cube. And as I've mentioned previously, the cube may end up being sparse because you might have removed some of the individual points in here, or you might have made it bigger by drawing some extra results that would then give you an implied bigger cube that would surround both the ones you selected. But in either case, it will always be meaningful to say I'm going to effectively slice it or filter it to one particular member, either one scenario, one element, one result. So in the chart I was showing you, when I'm using the control here to go from DSL base to WiMAX base, all I'm doing is I'm moving from the top floor of this, which is the DSL base scenario, down to the middle floor, which is the WiMAX base scenario. And having that slicing ability, as I say, not only does it give you the option to do it right there in your face, and it's more immediate, but it's also much simpler because you're effectively you're predetermining a short list rather than having to go back to what could be, in general terms, potentially a very large set of things to choose from. Clearly, if there weren't too many points in this cube, you might want to show more than one of that shortlist. So you might want to show 2 of the 3 scenarios. And we've adopted the terminology thick slice for that eventuality. We haven't implemented it yet, but the idea would be that if you did have excuse me, more than one of them, then obviously the more than one of them would have to be back into the legend. Ideally, you'd have a multi-dimensional legend where you could show the scenarios as line styles or whatever, independent from the element names as colors or whatever. And then the idea would be that you'd right click on the relevant bit here and it would pop up the shortlist so you could pick other ones from the shortlist. We're not certain yet that that's so well understandable as to actually be useful. So at the present time, the only thing you can see is the thin slice, but it's obvious that you could extend that to a thick slice. And my concern is that it's so easy to imagine the thick slice once you've got a thin slice that people are very likely to ask for it. And we may look silly if we haven't actually implemented it. The slice command, in summary, is a way to predetermine a shortlist in any of the dimensions so that you can then make it easy to change what you have without going back to the full choices. And it's intended really as an interactive element. Just one more time, let me close this graph and draw another one. So if I go draw new, I could even, I've got my service here. I could go to the results where I've picked these three. I could choose to slice on the results as well. And if I pick operating charge as the one to have by default, and I've got my scenarios, I'm having DSL base. Now I'm going to have two controls where the graph is just showing me operating costs for internet access, and I can choose to switch it from operating cost to operating charge, or from operating charge to operating profit. And at any time I can also switch from DSL base to WiMAX base or dual base. So you can actually build up a multi-dimensional interactive tool with this as well. So really, there are no end of possibilities for the slice functionality.